I don't know if you saw the video, but this past summer I went to Leland, Michigan looking for Leland Blue, which is a slag glass. And I met up with Cody from Michigan Rockhounds there, and he totally showed me up and found all kinds of really nice stuff, and I found a couple small pieces. This was my best piece, and he was finding them like baseball size. So anyhow, this is a result of 3 times going there and picking up Leland Blue. One of them snorkeling and the other times on the beach. And then this stuff is from Mark, who's also from Michigan Rockhounds, and he sent me this. He got this in Elk Rapids. It's more slag glass, but it's a green color. And he said this came from Leland. So it looks like he must have dug this up somewhere. This doesn't look like it's been beach tumbled like mine does. So either way, it'll all tumble up, and that's what I'm planning to do today, is tumble some Leland. So this is slag glass, which if you're not familiar with it, it's from smelting iron ore from the late 1800s. There was a company there that did this, and there were several companies along Lake Michigan. The iron ore came from the UP, and then they smelted it there, and this is the industrial waste from that, but it's kind of beautiful industrial waste. So what I'm going to do is treat this like obsidian or glass, since it is glass. You can see it's very glassy here. These pieces don't look so glassy. But that's because they've been rolling around in the water. It's kind of like beach glass versus regular glass. So I'm going to treat this the same way. I'm going to start by doing this stuff first. Actually, some of these are kind of big, so maybe I'll do a mixture. But I want to get some of these big ones in here because they're really rough. They're going to take a little bit longer. So we'll do the small ones, these small ones. And I'm going to fill this up maybe a little more than usual. So here's where we're at right now. Get some of this little stuff in here. And the real little ones I might not even do in this first stage. But I'll get all the other ones and do them at least a week. But some of these really little tiny pieces, there's no point in tumbling that because it's just going to be gone. So I'll just probably put that in without tumbling in the first stage and see how that goes. So I've got this pretty full, maybe a little too full. So I'm around 80% full. There'll be less movement in here, and it'll bang the stuff up a little bit less. I don't want to break it. I'm still thinking that's a little full. There we go. So I'm going to put water in here, and the water is going to be down from the top about a ½ inch to an inch. All right, so somewhere around in there. Hopefully you can see that. And then I'm going to put in 3 tablespoons of 6090 silicon carbide grit. So you could use other grit, 80 grit, even like 4670. In this first stage, we're just roughing this stuff. So it can be pretty coarse. And we'll just put the lid on here, pop this on the tumbler, and we'll check on it in a week. I rinsed these off a little more and then dried them off and put them back in the barrel so you could see how much volume was lost. This is no more than half full, so it's lost quite a bit, more than normal rocks do. And this is pretty soft stuff, so I am not surprised by that. Let's dump them out. And we'll take a little closer look at them and decide which ones need to go back in for another week and which ones are ready to move on to the next stage and will be set aside. If you've watched any of my videos at all, you probably know that I like my rocks to be as smooth and perfect as possible. And if you look at that one, it's got little air bubbles all through it, and that's just the way this stuff is. It's got air bubbles throughout the whole thing. So I could grind forever, and there are always just going to be more air bubbles that come out. So there's nothing I can do about those. Other than those, everything looks really nice and smooth, so that one's good to go. Let's take this one. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what to do with one like this. So, there's a little bit there that I can probably grind out, and I probably will. This side, it just has some iron or something in there. There's not much I can probably do about that. there's a little thing right there that I'd like to get rid of. So I think that one's going to go in for another week. And I might be over tumbling this. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I'm going to do with it. So there's a piece in here I wanted to look at this one. You can see this one's got some major cracks going on. It's not a very pretty piece anyhow, but that's gotta get ground out. Now there's all these little pieces here, and I did not put in little tiny pieces. So these are probably chips. Some of them might have been some of the smaller pieces that got ground down too much, but other ones are probably chips off of stuff like this. I mean, you can kind of see that probably came out of there. So that's going in for another week. And I'm just going to go through each one of these. I think I can grind that out, and this is a pretty big one, so I've got a little bit to work with here. So that'll go in for more. That one's going to go in for more. And I just need to make a judgment call on these. That one, I think, is done. I think those are air bubbles that, like I said, they're going to be all through the stuff. I'd kind of like to grind that out. That you can see there's a spall there. It's like a very shallow fracture. But that might come out in the next stage. It might not, but this is small enough I'm not going to take a chance. So I'll just go through the rest of these and look at them and decide, like this one is ready for the next stage. This one probably is too. I don't love that, but I'm going to move that to the next stage. That's probably just going to end up being ground away to nothing, but I don't like it the way it is, so that'll go back in for another one. So I've decided these have had enough tumbling, and these need a little bit more. These little tiny pieces are going to just be gone anyhow, so I'll just put them in there. They'll get in between the little nooks and crannies of the bigger rocks. And then I can add in some other stuff here, so I'm going to try to get in at least one big one each time. And then we'll get some other smaller stuff to go around it. I'm going to try to fill this up enough that it'll have a little more gentle ride than banging stuff around. Alright, something like that. Yeah, maybe one too many. Like that, so get these little scraps in here. Oops, now I've made a mess. Put some water in. Alright, so there's the water, and they're still using 60/90 grit, so put 3 tablespoons of that in. And I'll put this back on the tumbler for another week, and we'll check in on it then. Alright, 2 weeks down now. These got done over the past week, and they'll join the ones that were done last week. And then these all need some more time. So they're going to go back in the barrel. And some of these are just kind of horrible. I don't think that one's ever going to look good. I'm starting to get the idea of what good quality Leland blue looks like and poor quality Leland blue. And some of these are pretty bad. So I'm going to keep tumbling them. Maybe some miracle will happen, but I don't have high hopes at this point. And then these are going to go in to fill up the barrel the rest of the way, and we're just going to keep redoing this first stage over and over and over again. When these are all done, then we'll be going on to the next stage. Hey, another week down, and here's where we're at. These are all finished, sorta. So I'm making judgment calls on these. Like this one has these little warts of what I think are probably iron sticking out all over the place. They don't seem to be going away, so I'm just going to call that one done. This one has lots of gas bubbles on this side. This side is less gas bubbly, but I could tumble it away to nothing, or I could just say, hey, that's good enough and move it on. Some of these look kind of horrible, like I showed you last week, but they're not getting any better, so we'll just stick them in this done batch. They'll go in with the other ones that were done from before, and we'll move them on to the next stage later. These need some more time in the tumbler. That one, somebody made a bad judgment call, probably me, and I thought this was Leland blue, and it isn't. It's got some bands on it though, so I might stick it in one of my other tumblers and just see how it turns out. And then this is the stuff that I haven't started tumbling yet. So between this and this, that's what we have to get done before we go on to the next stage. This week, these are done with the first stage, and I'll add them to the ones that were done in the previous weeks. And these need more time. And I'm not sure if there is enough time to make this thing look good. It probably should have been left on the beach, but I'm going to just keep it in there. It'll fill up space if nothing else. And we are kind of in need of filling up some space. Those little pieces, they're not going to really help that much. They might get in the nooks and crannies a little bit, so I just keep throwing them in. But we're down to probably a little less than half a barrel. So these are some saw scraps from making, well, you can see this one is a cross and it broke, so I just cut it off and I'll tumble it like that. But little Christmas ornaments and crosses and stuff, I get all these little tumbling scraps. I don't want too many really little pieces in there, because sometimes if you have too many little ones, for some reason it makes stuff not grind very well. You get a bunch of leftover grit at the end of the week. But I'll go something like that. And that shouldn't hurt anything that it's a different material. I mix materials all the time, and I don't think this is that fragile it'll be a problem. So we'll see how they look after another week. Well, there's not too much done this week. That little tiny pile of Leland Blue is finished. That needs some more time. Like I said before, some of this stuff's really bad. This one, I'm trying to get this one little hole out of here, and it's not the end of the world if it doesn't get tumbled out. Where's this other one? This one's got kind of a crack right there. I'd really like that to tumble out. So we'll give these one more week, and whether they're done or not, one more week's all they get. I did get these saw scraps done. These need some more time. I got lots more saw scraps to put in, so we'll load this barrel up for one more week, and then we'll go on to the finishing steps. Well, we're done with the first stage now. These are as done as they're going to be. Some of these look fine, like that one looks good. This one has a little thing in there that I'd like. That's not a gas bubble. I'd like to tumble that out, but I'm just not going to take the time to do it. This has huge holes all over the place. There's no tumbling those out, so that's as done as it was going to be anyhow. So anyhow, we're going to move on to the next stage. Before we do that, though, I wanted to show you something. Remember, this is slag from smelting iron. This is a magnet, or a stack of little magnets. Look at this. That's little iron pieces that fell out. In fact, take those off, and we're not going to put those in the tumbler barrel. But like this piece, it has pieces of iron sticking out all over the place, and that sticks on there very well. That's actually kind of hard to pull off. So there's a lot of iron still in this stuff. So this is the first time I've ever tumbled a whole batch of slag, and I've been thinking I'd treat it like obsidian right from the beginning, but I'm not really sure if that's necessary or not. So we're going to kind of play it by ear from here. Here are 3 pieces of slag that I tumbled last winter. I picked these up, I think it was last year, might have been the year before. I picked them up in Marquette anyhow. So this is a different kind of slag from a different location, but it should be very similar. And these were just tumbled in a regular tumbler. It was in a vibratory tumbler, which we're going to switch to right here. But this is the way I tumble all my other rocks. This was with a bunch of other beach rocks from up in the UP. And it turned out really nice. I mean, you couldn't ask for it to be any shinier than that. There's all kinds of shine there. So if this seems to be working like that did, then we won't use the obsidian method. And if it's not, we'll go to the obsidian method, which is just tumbling it longer is all it really is. So I'm going to move over to the sink, and I'll show you how we're going to fill up this barrel. This is a Lotto barrel, so we're going to be putting it on a Lotto tumbler in a little bit. You can use other vibratory tumblers. They might take a little different amounts of time depending on the tumbler, but this is the one I'm using. I'm going to err on the side of caution and use a lot of ceramics in here. So this is ceramic media, and I'm going to fill the barrel half full of this. Now with regular rocks, I don't usually fill it up that much with, or use quite that many ceramics. But for certain things I do. If there's like a lot of flat things in there, I'll use more ceramics. For obsidian, I use more ceramics. And in this case, I'm going to use more ceramics. So it's about half full. And then I'm going to fill it up with water. This is a canning funnel, by the way. It works really well on the top of a Lotto. Fits in there just perfectly. Alright, so we're full of water, and then I'm going to put as many of these Leland Blues in there as I can. Big one in there first. get in there. I like the water in there for a couple reasons. It kind of cushions things as they're going in, so they're not falling to the bottom and possibly getting chipped. And I also have to get them all wet at the end anyhow. So may as well do it right now. So then I usually shake them down, and I might have to add a couple more in on the tumbler because as those ceramics get in between the rocks, the level will probably go down a little bit. I think I can get one or two more in here though. Let's put that one in, and it's not a very pretty color. And we'll do that one. Alright, I might be able, like I said, squeeze one more in later on. So let's take it over to the tumbler and get it rolling. Oh, gotta empty the water first. Almost forgot. So the water needs to all come out now. So what we want is wet rocks, or wet slag in this case. So I'm just letting it, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I'm holding my hand over like this and just letting the water go between my fingers. It's pretty exciting, isn't it? Alright, now we'll go put it on the tumbler. This is my Lotto tumbler. I keep it under the stairs that go from my basement up to my garage, so it's a little echoey down here. Let me turn this on. I can get one more in there, so I'm going to throw this one in. Yeah, that should be okay. Okay, so normally I don't put borax in this stage, but I do with obsidian, and I'm going to do it with this. So a tablespoon of borax. And then I'm going to be using 220 silicon carbide. And with normal rocks, I put in 2 tablespoons. With obsidian, I use a ½ teaspoon. So I'm going to go in between and just use 1 tablespoon in here. And then I'll have to keep an eye on this because this will get pretty thick over the next few hours. It's getting close to bedtime here, so I'll be checking this in the morning and giving a little squirt of water. It's the next morning, time to check this. That's doing pretty good. It's a little water, a little thick in there. Not sure the borax was necessary based on how thick that looks. But I'll continue looking at this for the rest of the day and tomorrow. So after 2 days we'll change this out and start the next stage. It's been 2 days, so it's time to do a clean out now. I like to add a little squirt of dish detergent and some water. And then I'll just let those run for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, and then I'll rinse them off. I rinse these 3 or 4 more times over the bucket because I don't want any slurry going down my sink. And to be honest with you, there's going to be a little bit of slurry going down my sink because I'm going to continue cleaning these out. But it's pretty minimal, and it's just a risk I'm willing to take. I'm not suggesting you do the same thing, but you didn't see it, but this hole was full of ceramics and grit and stuff. So I washed that out. already, just rinsed it out. I had to kind of poke at it with a sewing needle. And I'm going to go through each one of these since there's all those holes in them. I'm going to inspect them and make sure that there's nothing stuck in the holes. Okay? Especially grit, and like that's a piece of ceramic media in there, little tiny piece. That should go in the garbage because it's broken. I don't pick all those out, but if I see one, I throw it in the garbage like that. And then a lot of times there'll be grit underneath there. And if you use a needle, or sometimes I'll use an old drill bit, one of my little 1mm drill bits that I use for rocks, I'll poke at stuff, like right here, and you can see if it's soft or not, or if it's part of the rock. So there's another little piece of ceramic. Throw that away so it doesn't get stuck in there again. And so between the needle and a toothbrush, I'm going to just clean all these out really well. I'm just throwing them right back in the lotto barrel here. So there's another little piece of ceramic media. What you don't want is the grit going back into the next stage. I want to get all that stuff out. Oops, I lost that one. Some people have suggested, when I've done stuff like this in the past, they've suggested I got an ultrasonic cleaner. I have read that those can sometimes break your rocks. I don't know if that's good information or how often it happens, but I did read that, so I'm just a little bit cautious there. The other thing is I don't really want other pieces of equipment in my basement. I got enough stuff down here as it is, so it's kind of like cooking things. If you get too many specialized things, you got to store them all. The other thing people have suggested is a water pick, which I think is probably a pretty good idea. But once again, I just don't want to store it. And it's not that often that I have rocks like this with holes all over them, so I'm just willing to work on them a little bit. Another thing I've heard people use that I have thought about buying and I haven't, but it's like a water pick, but it's called a fabric cleaner. It's a high pressure thing, much like a water pick, but I think stronger than a water pick. I want to say they're like $50 or something on Amazon. Probably get them other places, but I've looked for them before, 50 or 60, something like that. So they're not cheap, but anyhow, good ideas. Please don't suggest them again. I had a million suggestions last time I did something like this. So that's why I'm mentioning it here. I know about them. I've decided not to get them. Alright, I'm going to finish these up, and I will see you over at the tumbler for the next step. We're still at the sink because there's a couple things that I was going to mention and I forgot to. This is a gold classifier, and I like to use this because it fits in the bucket perfectly. It's made for a 5-gallon bucket. And I put my colander on top of that. It doesn't fall in the bucket that way, but I also carry it over here because it catches stuff that goes through the colander. So those ceramics would be lost in my bucket, or they'd end up going down my drain. I also have in my drain this little thing. And then I put a little piece of screen inside that, so that keeps all the small stuff from going down my drain. It gets clogged all the time, but that tells me it's doing its job. So anyhow, I just thought you might want to know about that. And I wanted to look at one dried off rock. Now we shouldn't be drying them off at this stage, but since it's a video, you might want to see how they're coming along. This is in 220 silicon carbide, and silicon carbide won't polish your rocks. It's a little wet spot there. So don't expect them to be polished. They should be smoother. You're not going to notice a big difference right now, though. They are smoother, but they're not going to be at all shiny. So next step, they'll get shiny. Before we start the next stage, I want to make sure these are super clean with all those little holes in there, and this is going to help a lot. So I don't always do this, but I think it's really important today to do it. So I'm going to put in a tablespoon of borax. And just dump her in there. It'll get mixed up and dissolve anyhow. And sometimes I just use dish detergent, like I've been using, what is this, Ajax. I really can't tell the difference. I used to always use borax, and I've been using just dish detergent more and more often, and I really haven't noticed a difference, but I'm going to use borax this time. So I'm going to turn this on. All the water's been drained out. And I'm going to pour this in until the rocks slow down a little bit. So a fair amount, quarter cup or so. What I want is there to be some moisture in there, some water in there, so when the grit falls out of the holes, it kind of sinks down to the bottom through the water. It doesn't keep sticking on the rocks. So I'm going to let that run for, usually I do it for like 15 minutes, maybe a half an hour between stages. Since these holes are so deep and there's so many of them, I'm going to let it go for like an hour and just be sure that everything looks good. And then we'll go on to the next stage. These just got our rinse in the sink after the little wash. And I'm going to put in a tablespoon of borax. And then 1/2 teaspoon of 500 aluminum oxide. So this should start shining things up. And I'm going to leave them in here for at least 3 days and maybe longer. I'm just going to play it by ear. But they should be getting pretty shiny in here before I switch them out to the polish. So 3, maybe 4 days, and then we'll move to polish. These have been running for 4 days now. I was going to check after 3 days, but I got busy yesterday and never got around to doing it. So anyhow, I just pulled one out. I rinsed this one off, and it's really shiny. This is dry. So they're definitely ready for the polish stage. So what I'm going to do is clean these out. I'll put them back in and do like a 1 hour run in either borax or dish detergent, and then I'll show you what we're going to do for the final stage. Got them all cleaned off after the 500 stage, and it's ready to start the polish stage. I have a special barrel just for polish. That's nice to have, but I really don't think it's all that critical because sometimes I forget to use it and the rocks come out just as shiny. So honestly, I wouldn't bother getting a polish barrel. But if you have one, this would be the time to use it. So get this started. I have 1 tablespoon of borax going in. And then I'm going to use 1/2 teaspoon of aluminum oxide polish. Make sure you're using a high quality polish. I have links to my 2 favorite lapidary stores in the description of all my videos, so if you want to know what I use, just go check that out. So 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm going to let that run for 2 days and check on it. I think 2 days will be plenty. If it's not, I'll let it go a little bit longer. Well, they're all finished up, and we've got some interesting results. Some turned out better than others, and some turned out in ways that I didn't really expect. So let's take a look at them. Here they are. Some of these had a lot of holes in them, so I went through, when I rinsed them out, and went through those with a sewing needle again and picked all the stuff out. Had ceramics jammed down in that hole again, so I had to pick those out. When I was done, I threw these back in the tumbler twice. I did 2 wash stages, just to make sure all the holes were cleaned out. And I don't see any white specks in any of them, so I think I did a pretty good job. I used a toothbrush on some of them, but I think I got everything out. So some of these turned out nice and shiny, like this one. This has a really good shine. I think you can see the glare on it. And then there's other ones, like this one, for example. Not nearly as nice of a shine on that one. So there's quite a bit of variability in this material. This one's pretty shiny. Just kind of a boring gray color. It's not that pretty, but pretty good shine on it. Then I've got some that have pieces of iron sticking out. I think that's really cool. I mean, obviously it comes from smelting iron, so it's not a surprise that there'd be some iron in some of it, but I think it sticks out because the iron's malleable, and I think when the grit scratches against it, it just probably sort of smears it around rather than breaking little pieces off. So you can see how it's all sticking out like that. Here's a piece here, really sticking out. I think that's super cool. Let's see. This one's neat. Looks like a tube agate. Do you see how there's kind of an entry there and an exit there, or vice versa, and there's a tube in between, kind of under the surface? You can see one here. Actually, they're all like that. There's a whole constellation of them there, and you can see Right down there, you can see it kind of going down into the rock. That one's really cool. That's one of my favorites. And I like these light blue colored ones. That one's got some metal in it. This is one of my favorites as far as color goes, but it chipped. And I actually found the chip here. That little piece fits right on there. It must have chipped fairly early on in the lotto process because both halves are shiny. Both the broken parts there. Fun stuff. I really like the ones with the metal sticking out. That one's kind of ugly, but then it's got these little metal protrusions here. So if you like this sort of video, like this end part here where I, little piece of metal right on that one, where I just go through a pile of rocks like this and kind of show them to you. I have a whole series called Rocks in a Box because actually this is a cabinet, and inside this cabinet underneath here there's probably 100 boxes of rocks, and I've gone through a lot of them in videos where they're already tumbled and I just pull out a box of rocks and we go through them. So I've got a playlist here of some of the most popular ones. So if you want to check those out, if you haven't seen those before, do that, and I'll talk to you over there.